working with class libraries. See, so far we have seen how we can develop .NET Core console based application. And I've already told you before itself, using .NET Core we can also develop a class library, and using .NET Core we can also develop an ASP.NET application. So now we need to see in this session how we can develop a class library. But before that, you have to understand what exactly is .NET Standard. See, if you look at this diagram, if you are using .NET Framework, we would use base class library of .NET Framework. If you are using .NET Core has got its own library, and Xamarin would have its own library. So now, as Microsoft is supporting multiple frameworks, and in each of the framework they are providing, let's say, their respective libraries, the set of libraries are going to grow, and it's going to cause confusion. It's going to become difficult to even upgrade. So now what they are doing, they are replacing all these base class libraries or .NET Core libraries or mono class libraries. All are going to be replaced with a standard library, .NET Standard library. So basically, for all the frameworks, now we will have a common library which is going to work across different frameworks of Microsoft. And the advantage is we can also develop our own .NET framework, .NET Standard libraries. So what is .NET Standard? .NET Standard is a specification of .NET API that are intended to be available to all .NET implementation. That means it's a common specification now. Gradually, things will settle into .NET Standard. So that becomes a common framework for application development across all the platforms. So it unifies .NET platform and prevents future fragmentation. So .NET Standard is the way going forward. That is the most important point. For existing, we will use .NET Standard library, and also the custom libraries which we are building, for that also we are going to use .NET Standard libraries. So enables the following scenarios: basically a uniform set of base class libraries for all .NET implementations independent of the workload, common API basically. Enable developers to produce portable libraries that are usable across .NET implementations using the same set of API. Yes, common API is going to be there. So if I look at base class API here and here, there can be some slight differences. But because of .NET Standard, it's going to become a common set of API which a developer is supposed to use now. And of course, because we have a common set of API, we don't have to do anything like a conditional compilation when we are trying to use the same library across multiple .NET framework, .NET implementations. So that's very important. It's just standard code can be written. So overall, .NET Standard is going to make the life of the developer very easy. They have to work with only one master base class library now. Libraries targeting .NET Standard will be able to run on all .NET platforms, and platforms providers don't have to guess which API they need to offer in order to consume the libraries available on NuGet. Yes, .NET Standard libraries are going to be distributed through NuGet package. So what is the conclusion? .NET Standard is the way going forward for all base class libraries which are going to be provided by Microsoft, and also for developers it is the way for developing custom libraries so that they can give to their users a common library irrespective of the framework implementation. So here you can see some version of .NET Standard. Now .NET Standard by itself is a specification, mind you, and .NET Standard has its own version. So right now what we have is .NET Standard 2.0, the latest. Now what is important is based on what framework, what implementation you are using, you have to use the respective .NET Standard version. Suppose I am developing my application, let us say using .NET Core. I can use .NET Core up to .NET Standard 1.6. But when I want to use .NET Core 2, I would have, sorry, it's the other way actually. What is the highest version of .NET Standard that you can target is the point. So if you are developing .NET Core, you cannot use .NET Standard 2.0. I repeat, based on my framework choice, what is the highest version of .NET Standard I can use is this particular table going to define for us. So let us say if I am developing .NET framework applications and if my target is 4.6, then I cannot use more than .NET Standard 1.3. I don't mind using 1.2, 1.1 and 1.0. But for 4.6, I cannot use 1.4. But when I am using 4.6.2, I cannot use more than 1.5. That's with .NET framework with combination of .NET Core 1.x SDK. But then .NET framework with .NET Core 2.0 SDK, that's the latest what we use now. So in those kind of cases, you can go up to 2.0. In 4.6.1, you can use 2.0. So this table basically is a summary of, based on your current version of .NET framework, what is the latest version of .NET Standard you can use for your application development. I'll demonstrate that with an example. So how to choose? When choosing .NET Standard version, you should consider this trade-off. Now pretty obvious, higher the version, more the API is going to be available. When I'm using .NET Standard 2.0, I'm obviously going to get extra functionality when compared to .NET Standard 1.6. Yes. But also at the same time, lower the version, with more other framework implementations it is compatible. So can I say that 1.0 is compatible with all .NET implementations, all versions? That is the advantage. So when choosing .NET Standard version, you should consider this trade-off. The higher the version, the more APIs are available to you. Lower the version, the more platform implements it. So what is the recommendation? The recommendation is to target lowest version of .NET Standard whenever possible. How we can achieve this? What you do is, first build your library with the latest version whatever is available. Let's say today it is 2.0. So I'll build my library with 2.0. Now after I build my library with 2.0, I'm going to see if the next lower version of .NET Standard is again going to compile my project completely. That means in my library, did I use any feature which is only specific to 2.0 and is not there in 1.6? If that is the case, I don't have choice but to stay there. But if I did not use any feature of 2.0 in my library and I've used only up to features of 1.6, then I will simply change the version from project properties. I'll change the version of the project to 1.6 and rebuild it. No error comes, I will then change to 1.5 and rebuild it. Then I'll change to 1.4 and rebuild. Like that I should preferably go down as much as possible. Remember, why is this supposed to be done? Because lower the .NET Standard version, more the implementations support. If I stick to 2.0, I cannot use .NET Core 1.0, 1.0 for development. I cannot. So that is the point you have to keep in mind. Target next lower version of .NET Standard and rebuild your project. If the project builds successfully, repeat step 1. Otherwise, retarget the next higher version, and that version you should use it. The primary distribution vehicle for .NET Standard libraries is NuGet package. So now we are not going to have packages, assemblies distributed through framework. Everything we will fetch through NuGet package. .NET Standard versions are backward compatible. This is important. Now what do I mean by that? Standard 1.0 libraries run on 1.1, but other way it is not true. The meaning is .NET Standard 1.0, everything will be compatible with 1.1. That guarantee is given by Microsoft. See, generally when they change the version, not necessarily everything of the previous version should work as it is. There is no such guarantee. But in .NET Standard, this particular guarantee or assurance is given to us that it's always going to be backward compatible. But obviously there is no concept of forward compatibility. Very good chance that .NET Standard 1.0, 1.1 lower the standard platform cannot reference the higher one. Basically what it means is, if I have developed already a .NET Standard library in .NET Standard 1.1, another library which was built using 1.0, I can use it, no problem. But in .NET Standard 1.1, I cannot use another library which is of 1.2. That's not possible. It cannot refer to higher ones. So this means .NET Standard 1.0 version libraries cannot reference the libraries which were targeted for 1.1. So versioning has been very strict here. What is the point is, the versioning is very strict. And moreover, this original table was much larger. I kept it only related to .NET Framework with .NET Core combination. There are more implementations which I showed you on top. You will have Xamarin also, you will have Mono also, like that multiple other implementations also you have to consider when you are developing .NET Standard. So basically this is from Google. You have a chart. These are .NET platforms, different implementations, and these are different versions of .NET Standard. Better. Of course, this will keep changing though. When new version of .NET Standard comes, this will again, the diagram will have to be enhanced. Yeah, so let's proceed now. How to build a .NET Standard class library. I'm going to take a project. We have the option. Let's take file, new project. I'm going to create a solution with multiple projects. So let's begin with first a simple console.NET Core application. So let's call it as Net Core Console app, and I'll create a directory. Multiple projects I'm going to add just to show you the combinations. So this is a simple console based application. To the same solution now I'm adding a new project, .NET Core class library. Mind you, .NET Core class library by itself is a template. So Net Core class library. Then I'll take .NET Standard class library. And obviously, can this application refer to this as well as this? This is a universal standard. It's going to be supported across multiple implementations. And this is .NET Core specific, and this will be supported here, absolutely no problem. But let's also bring into the picture .NET Framework class library. And framework console application, so that everything can be covered. So first what I'll do is, in .NET console application, in dependencies, I'm adding reference to standard library, core library, both .NET standard, .NET core. And build this project. We should not get any error. All successful. No version issues, nothing. Everything is successful. Now I go to framework console application, add reference. I add framework class library, and I can add standard class library. Let's verify if this works. Rebuild. Perfect. Absolutely no error. But now I go to framework and references. I now choose .NET Core library. In a framework console based application, I am adding core library. And rebuild. Error. The project .NET Core library targets .NET Core 1.2.1. It cannot be referenced by the project that targets Framework 4.6.2. Very important. So .NET Framework cannot make use of .NET Core. Conclusion is very clear. .NET Framework cannot use .NET Core libraries. .NET Framework is always a superset of everything. It has got its own libraries. So why should it use .NET Core? Instead, .NET standard libraries are pretty well supported, and that's fair enough. Now, I'll show you now, but I'll explain maybe in next chapter. I go to .NET Core standard console application, add reference to a framework class library, and I rebuild it, and it builds without any error. See, successfully built. .NET Core console application is able to use .NET Framework class library. This is for porting .NET applications into .NET console, .NET Core. This particular facility is given so that .NET existing .NET Framework applications, we should be able to port it to .NET Core. But with this, remember the .NET application, the .NET Core application will remain Windows specific. This .NET Core console application may not work on other operating systems because that .NET Framework class library will not work on other operating system. Linux and Mac, it will not work. But yes, to begin with, one would want to port existing .NET Framework applications into .NET Core, and this particular feature is going to be very important. Gradually, all .NET Framework libraries can be converted to .NET Core over a period of time. But very important point to be noted, .NET Framework class library cannot use .NET Core library. It can use standard. Rather, standard library you can use it anywhere. That's the beauty of it. And .NET Standard API, which is supported now, is pretty much enhanced. Most of it which is routine requirement for development is already part of .NET standard. Yeah, you cannot use WinForms, you cannot use WPF, those kind of things. You cannot use code access library. Those things are only not part of standard specification. Otherwise, the common API is already now part of standard specification. More specifically, 2.0 is much enhanced. .NET 1. Standard 1.6 also had certain limitations in terms of API. So 1.6 they directly jump to 2. There is nothing like 1.7, 8, 9. So I believe this is very clear to you all. I don't have to actually go and write something in it and then show you that this particular function of this particular class I'm able to use in this particular project. That is routine. Namespace, public, internal, those things what we know in context of .NET framework, same thing applies here as it is. The scope of the library, the classes which are restricted within the library, all that remains as it is, just that the version issues you have to take care of. The proper version and the proper framework which is used, rather implementation which is used. So standard is a specification, core is a specification, framework is a specification, standard is a specification which will work in all the different implementations of .NET and is going to be a way forward for development of all your libraries. Thank you.